Hi, everyone. Welcome to Gemini's Intro to Crypto webinar. Today, this webinar is going to be hosted by myself and Eric Weiner, who is the VP of Engineering here at Gemini. And in this webinar, you're going to be learning about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, the current and future state of the crypto ecosystem, and how you can buy, sell, and store crypto. And don't worry, at the end of the webinar, we're going to have some time for Q&A, so feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A throughout this chat, and welcome. We're excited that you're here. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Claire Lovell. I'm the Principal Product Manager here at Gemini. I've been here just since October, but I've been working in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space for about 5 years now. And I was inspired to join the space because I think it really democratizes access to our financial systems and allows more kinds of people to access them. Eric, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. I'm Eric Weiner. I'm the VP of Engineering here at Gemini. Really glad you all could make it. I've been at Gemini from the very beginning of the company's founding, which is about 6 years ago, which makes Claire and I both pretty ancient in the world of crypto. But honestly, it took me some time to understand what makes cryptocurrency so important and so groundbreaking. Hopefully through this webinar, we can accelerate your understanding of it faster.
So today we're going to be talking about a variety of different things. First, we're going to talk about the building blocks of cryptocurrency as well as blockchain, and then why we think it's so important, and how you can participate in the community. And then going beyond Bitcoin to other cryptocurrencies, and then what we think is happening in cryptocurrencies today, what might happen in the future, and as I mentioned, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So before we get to our presentation, we'd like to just start things off with a quick poll here. So we're going to ask any of you if you own cryptocurrency currently. So we're going to send out this poll, and then you can just click your answer, and we'll share the results with you in just a second. Kind of a fun fact about me is that I've actually never sold any of the cryptocurrency that I've purchased before. Eric, when did you first buy Bitcoin and how much was it?
I actually first bought Bitcoin the day I met Gemini's founders, the Winklevoss twins. They were talking to me about how great crypto was, but how hard it was to use at the time. So in order to see it for myself, I went out and bought about a quarter of a Bitcoin. And I think a Bitcoin was worth about $600 or so back then. Sure enough, the whole process was a total pain. Part of that convinced me to join Gemini and help make the experience better for everybody.
Cool. So getting the results here. Awesome. Looks like the majority of you, about 2/3 of you, actually do have crypto now, and another third of you not yet. And then there's another percentage, about 10% of you are thinking about it. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll be thinking even harder about it. So moving on from the poll here, let's talk about the building blocks. We're going to talk about what Bitcoin is, what makes it different from fiat currencies, which are the currencies you use every day, like the US dollar, and the building blocks of crypto in general. So let's get started here. So some of you are probably asking, what actually is Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is money. It's also a currency. And unlike fiat dollars, it's stored on the internet. So it's digitally native and global. It's really built for the whole world to use. So you've heard of Bitcoin, presumably, and that's why you joined this webinar. But we want to talk about what makes Bitcoin different from other kinds of assets, because it has some really unique characteristics. So what makes it different is that if you have an internet connection, you can use Bitcoin. You don't need to have a bank account at any particular bank. You don't need to have a particular government's ID. You don't need to go to a foreign exchange trader. If you have the internet, you're able to purchase Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. And that's what's really different about Bitcoin, is that democratizing factor, that it's really available to everyone. And it's really kind of works like cash, but for the internet. And I think that's one of the properties that makes it so special. You don't need anyone's permission either to use cryptocurrency. that's why it's called decentralized. So if you picked up $1 from the sidewalk today, you could go spend it at a store, right? But if you have Bitcoin, you can spend it somewhere. Whereas if I wanted to go acquire US dollars to interact with the banking system, I would need to open a bank account, and then I would need to get underwritten by that bank. I need to show my ID. There's a lot of steps there. There's a lot of people who need to sign off and approve me to have access to that system. But with Bitcoin, there is no central authority like that. So there's no one arbitrating who can have Bitcoin, and that's why it's called decentralized. So decentralized really just means that there's no single authority who controls Bitcoin. No person, no company, no government controls Bitcoin. Also, no one can just make more Bitcoin out of thin air. No one can take it out of your account without your express permission. And so for the purposes of this presentation, we're mostly going to be talking about Bitcoin and US dollars, but really just to stand in for cryptocurrency and fiat dollars. So most of the concepts we're talking about are really applicable to all cryptocurrencies and to all fiat currencies. So now that hopefully you understand what cryptocurrency is a little bit better, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't actually need that. US dollars are working just fine for me. Well, you have to remember that a lot of people actually don't have access to trusted banking in a lot of places. For example, in Venezuela today, if I go to buy a cup of coffee, it's going to cost me $1 million. So currency inflation there is just so egregious that it's really difficult for you to save some money today and know that you'll have enough money to buy bread tomorrow. And Bitcoin is a real alternative to people in scenarios like that. You can even think about what's happening today in our government. We've basically printed essentially trillions of dollars. And so as a hedge against that, maybe you'd like to own some Bitcoin.
So a lot of explanations of Bitcoin, they tend to throw out a lot of technical jargon, a bunch of buzzwords at you. I always think that in order to understand what Bitcoin is or how crypto in general works, it's important to start from the very beginning. So let's do that. Have you ever thought about how money works, what a dollar bill really represents? So we'll talk about that for a second. If you think about cash, it's a pretty simple concept. If I hand Claire a $5 bill, I can now see that Claire's got $5 more, I've got $5 less. And as long as she's got that piece of paper on her, she can spend it or she can save it however she likes. So the term for this is that cash is a bearer instrument. Whoever has possession of that $5 bill, whoever bears it, is the owner of that $5. But when you take things online, things get a little more complicated. There's really no way to put cash online without relying on some third party. So if you've got your bank account or your credit card, or you've got a Venmo or PayPal or Square Cash App, there's no pile of dollar bills sitting in a vault somewhere. It's just records on their computers. Your money isn't really real in that sense. Venmo or whoever, they just keep a little balance record of what money's in everybody's account. So if I pay Claire $5 on Venmo, Venmo just changes their records. They take $5 out of my account records, they add $5 to hers. But Venmo or your bank or the government could decide to freeze your account, or they could just accidentally mess up your records, or they could go out of business. And there's not a lot you can do about that. As Claire mentioned, this works pretty well for us in the United States. We tend to trust our financial institutions. We've got pretty good regulations. We've got consumer protection laws. But in a lot of places in the world, that's not the case. One other example is in 2013 in Cyprus, the government basically reached into people's bank accounts and took up to 10% out of it as a tax. And so the real kicker there is you can't opt out of that system. Before crypto came along, there's just literally no way to pay for something online without having some financial institution handling it for you. So Bitcoin really solves that problem in two ways. First of all, only the account owner can spend their Bitcoin. So just like you've got dollars in a bank account, you can have Bitcoin in a Bitcoin account. In the world of crypto, we usually call that an address or a wallet instead of an account. Every Bitcoin address has a 160 character sort of random looking password. And the term we use for that is a private key. You need that password. You need that private key in order to spend Bitcoin or send it to somebody else. If you don't have the private key, you can't spend that Bitcoin. You can't take it out of that account. So that really makes Bitcoin a bearer instrument, just like cash. The person who has that password, who has that private key, is the person who owns the Bitcoin in that address. That really makes Bitcoin digital cash, unlike the money in your bank account. The second big innovation here is that the records of all Bitcoin transactions and all address balances, they're out on the internet for everybody to see. Anybody can run Bitcoin software and independently verify that information, verify that every new transaction is actually valid, that the person who's spending it had the right private key. That also means that if somebody knows your Bitcoin address, they can see how many Bitcoins you have, but you don't necessarily have to tell everybody your Bitcoin address, or you can make new ones if you want to. So all of this put together means that you can interact directly with somebody else. You can transact without relying on a third party or on a financial institution. Instead, there's thousands of independent entities, people running Bitcoin software on their computers, on their cell phones, on devices, and each of those is independently checking every transaction that goes through the Bitcoin network, verifying that it's valid. So we've introduced a bunch of new terms, so we're going to take another quick look at them. Bitcoin, as you now know, it's global money. It's built for the internet. A private key is like a password to your address, which is like an account. And we've been talking a lot about Bitcoin, sort of using it as an example. It's the first cryptocurrency, and it's the oldest one. But most of what Claire and I have been talking about so far applies to all cryptocurrencies, even ones that aren't Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is one in a category of cryptocurrencies. There are other ones that have some different features. We'll be talking a bit later in this session about Ethereum, the second most popular cryptocurrency. And every cryptocurrency is a type of blockchain. Sort of blockchain's kind of the technology that backs it. But you can use blockchain to track other things that aren't just money and financial transactions. There's blockchains out there that track vegetables as they go from the farm to the distributor to the grocery store. There's blockchains out there that track intellectual property, like who owns the rights to a song or to a piece of art.
So let's talk about inflationary versus deflationary currencies. You've probably heard of inflation. That's what I was talking about before that's happening in Venezuela. That's just when the price of goods go up over time. And most of the time, one of the reasons for that is just that there's more dollars in the supply. So like I mentioned, the United States government recently injected $2 trillion into the economy. So there's more dollars out there now. And that might mean that the spending power of your dollar might be lessened. It's not really necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, this is something that the government felt was necessary to maintain the economy in a time of uncertainty. But your motivations as a person might be totally different from what our government or another government wants to do with their monetary supply. So for you, your priority might be protecting your spending power. With Bitcoin, you really don't have to worry about what any authority is doing with their monetary supply, because the amount of Bitcoin is determined by a mathematical formula. So there will only ever be a maximum of 21 million Bitcoins, and that's why it's a deflationary currency. So in the world of Bitcoin, no one can create 2 trillion Bitcoins and insert those into the system. So putting all these concepts together that Eric and I have been talking about, it's important to remember that Bitcoin is global, digital, and decentralized. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are not backed by any government, and so their price is just set by buyers and sellers. They're held digitally, so you can send money around the world in seconds for very small amounts of money. In some cases, it really just costs pennies. And you don't have to worry about wire fees or exchange rates or anything like that. So as we've been talking about, it's not controlled by any authority. So how do you know that the money actually has moved from one point to another? And money, when you send money between two parties, cryptocurrency money, I should say, it's verified by what you can sort of think of as a spreadsheet in the cloud. That's obviously a simplification, but I think that's an easy way to think about it. So a network of computers solve mathematical formulas to confirm that a transaction happened and that the money actually moved from point A to point B. So instead of trusting any central authority like the central bank or a literal bank, we're trusting math because that's how we prove that the transaction actually happened and that the money is moved from one person to another. So you can see and verify all of those transactions publicly, and that public record is called the blockchain. So now that you understand Bitcoin a little bit better, and especially those 10% of you who are thinking about it, you might want to think about getting involved and how to participate in the ecosystem. So let's talk about that. So today, one Bitcoin is worth about $9,000+, but you don't actually need $9,000 to buy a Bitcoin because you can spend as little as $5 to buy Bitcoin. That's because Bitcoin can be broken up into fractions, just like a dollar. So I can, break a dollar into pennies and cents. Same thing with a Bitcoin. So if you want to invest, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, it's really up to you how much you want to put into the system. And a lot of people just use a dollar cost averaging strategy. So they just buy a small amount of Bitcoin, every 2 weeks or something like that. So how do you actually buy Bitcoin? Which is another, I think I saw that question come up in the chat. So there's a lot of ways to buy it. One, you can go to an exchange like Gemini. You can also go to a Bitcoin ATM, which is basically where you can just exchange cash for cryptocurrency. You can buy it or get it as a gift from other people. And in some cases, you can even earn it. There's some services out there where you can get your paycheck in Bitcoin, for example. You can also do Bitcoin mining. It's pretty difficult in 2020 because you need a lot of very expensive hardware to do that. So it's probably not something I would recommend to anyone who's just learning about crypto. So the safest and easiest thing to do is just go ahead and buy it on an exchange. So you just go ahead, create an account, give us a little bit of your personal information, hook up your bank account, and then you can buy as much cryptocurrency as you would like.
Of course, I'm sure you guys have all heard a lot about the price of Bitcoin. It went up to $20,000 a few years ago, went all the way back down to $3,000, and now a Bitcoin's worth about $9,700. But price is just determined by supply and demand, just like stocks in the stock market or the currency exchange booth in the airport, milk in the supermarket, or gas at the pump. So if more people want to buy Bitcoin than sell it, there's more demand, the price goes up. If more people are trying to get rid of their Bitcoin, then there's more supply, the price goes down. So when you hear about, when you're looking at the Bitcoin price, you're really looking at the last price somebody was willing to pay to buy some Bitcoin. Maybe somebody just bought a tenth of a Bitcoin for $978. That means a Bitcoin's worth 10 times that, so $9,780. Exchanges like Gemini, where we work, they're constantly matching up buyers and sellers at a price that they can both agree on. So that's a good place to go to learn the price of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. And it's worth noting, just like your car doesn't care whether the tank of gas you put in it costs $4 a gallon or whether it costs $2 a gallon, the Bitcoin network, this whole system of digital cash, it works the same regardless of the price of Bitcoin. So we talked about how to get involved, but why would you get Bitcoin? There's a few key reasons we want to cover here. First of all, you can use it for things. You can send money anywhere in the world quickly and cheaply. There's a number of stores online and offline that let you pay for goods and services in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Secondly, you can also invest it. We've been talking a lot about why we think Bitcoin, why we think crypto is worthwhile. If you agree with us, if you also think that there's untapped potential here and it's going to be even more useful in the future than it is today, then it stands to reason that more people will be wanting Bitcoin in the future and the price should, over time, go up. If you don't have faith in your government or in your financial institutions, whoever's controlling your local economy or your local currency, you can still have faith in Bitcoin because it's based on these mathematical formulas. So you can buy today, hold on to it as a long-term investment. Finally, the price of Bitcoin is always moving a little bit in either direction. If you can anticipate those movements, you can trade the crypto exchanges and you can make some money, just like you can trade on the stock market. But of course, just like the stock market, you can also lose a lot of money playing the market. So it's something you should only do if you really sort of know what you're doing.
So let's say you go out after this and you acquire some Bitcoin, but you might be wondering where you actually keep it. So you've probably even heard stories of people actually losing their crypto, and that's because Bitcoin is kept in what we call a wallet. So that can be a physical device, it can be a piece of paper, it can be an online service, it can even be an app on your phone. And there's two main ways to store your Bitcoin. There's what we call self-custody, which is you store it yourself in one of those devices I just mentioned, and you hold that password or private key that Eric was speaking about. And so as long as you have that key, you actually can access your Bitcoin. If you lose the key though, you've lost your money. And so when you've heard cases of people losing their funds, that's usually what's happened. They've lost their private key. Especially if it's written down on a piece of paper and you lose that somewhere, you've lost those funds forever. But if you use an online service like Gemini, who's a qualified custodian, you have access to all of our security. Everything is completely licensed and regulated, and you can access your funds at any time. So generally, leaving your funds in an online account is the safest and easiest thing for most people. That way, even if you forget your password, you can just reset it, so you don't have to worry about losing anything. We store the keys for you, so as long as you can log into your account, you can access your funds at any time.
So let's go beyond Bitcoin now and explore some other cryptocurrencies. We'll start with another quick poll. So what cryptocurrencies have you all bought in the last year? While we're tabulating all the results, do you want to take a guess at it, Claire?
I'm going to guess that most people probably bought BTC, and there's probably a few of you that also bought Ethereum. Those are at the order of popularity of both of those, so I think that's a pretty safe guess.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of other cryptos have been gaining popularity lately. Let's see what it comes out as. Hey, actually a pretty even split. A lot of Bitcoin buyers, good number of Ethereum buyers, a lot of people going into the other coins, which is, I think, pretty impressive. And 37% of you guys still on the fence, but hopefully we can sway you. All right, let's get into it. So as we talked about earlier, there's a bunch of cryptocurrencies out there. Usually these are called altcoins, like an alternative to Bitcoin. And a lot of them add a bunch of interesting new functionality. So Ethereum has this new feature called smart contracts, which we'll talk about in a second. Zcash has encrypted transactions. There's all sorts of new cryptocurrencies out there that are doing new things. There's also new cryptocurrencies out there that are just kind of a clone of an existing one. One of my favorites is back in 2014, somebody came up with Kanye West, and not surprisingly, they immediately got sued. So Ethereum is the world's second most popular cryptocurrency. And where Bitcoin's built for payments, it's best for sending Bitcoin from one person to another, or for sending Bitcoin from one person to a merchant. Ethereum also works well for payments, but it's also got this way of running whole computer programs inside the blockchain. Computer programs that can move money around and can even hold on to money themselves. These programs are called smart contracts. And I think the easiest way to understand why they're so cool is with an example. You might be familiar with Kickstarter.com. It's a crowdfunding website. The whole thing's pretty simple. So this guy, Jason in Portland, he had the idea for a cat grooming brush that you stick in your mouth and lick your cat with. So he set a funding goal, and he needed to raise $35,000 in the next 30 days in order to start manufacturing these things. And if enough people pre-order their licky brushes in this time frame, then Kickstarter sends all that money to Jason and he can start manufacturing these brushes. But if he hadn't gotten that $35,000 in pre-orders, then all those pre-orders get canceled and Kickstarter refunds all the money back to the buyers. So when you think about what Kickstarter is really doing here, they've got a nice looking website, they're collecting a bunch of money, and then after 30 days, they're dispensing it right out to the right people and just taking a cut off the top for themselves. We could take that whole idea of how Kickstarter works, code it up in a computer program, and make that a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain. So this smart contract, this sort of Kickstarter imitation we build, it gets its own Ethereum address. So you can send money to that address to fund the project, and then after 30 days, the smart contract will automatically execute. and it'll dispense funds automatically to the right place, just like Kickstarter.com was doing before, but without taking a cut off the top. So just like Bitcoin enabled me to send some money to Claire over the internet without relying on some financial institution or some third party, Ethereum, with its smart contracts, it allows you to do even more complicated financial transactions, still without having to rely on a third party. So there's a ton you can do with these smart contracts, and people are coming up with new ideas every day. You could replace services like Kickstarter, maybe make a lower cost Uber competitor. These are often called decentralized applications, or dApps for short. There's a subset of dApps that are replicating all sorts of financial transactions. Like you could take out a loan, or you could earn interest on your cryptocurrency using smart contracts. One of the more popular ones is called Compound. This whole sphere is called decentralized finance, often abbreviated as DeFi. It's a really exciting space. There's games built in Ethereum smart contracts on the blockchain. One of the more famous ones of those is called CryptoKitties. Check it out, it's really fun. The kitties are really cute. You can also use a smart contract to track who owns some property or collectibles or artwork or even digital art. And finally, you could build a whole new cryptocurrency into the functionality of a smart contract. This is often called a token instead of cryptocurrency. And because that's so easy to do and so powerful, there's thousands of tokens available on the Ethereum blockchain or other smart contract supporting blockchains for all sorts of interesting purposes.
So all of this stuff sounds really cool, but what are people actually using crypto for today? So obviously, quite a few people are still buying it for speculation, and a lot of people are like what we call myself, a hodler, who buy it and hold it for a long period of time as a long-term investment. But you can also use it for really fast and cheap payments to anyone in the world. You can pay an employee in Asia, let's say, and they'll get a lot more of your dollars without having to worry about foreign exchange fees, wire fees, money transfer fees, and so on. You can also use it to actually pay for things like your coffee or your groceries. There are some merchants today that actually accept Bitcoin natively, like Overstock.com. And actually in our mobile app, we have a feature called Gemini Pay, which lets you pay with cryptocurrency at a number of different stores instead of using your credit card. And then you can also use it for things like smart contracts like Compound and CryptoKitties that Eric was speaking about. So you can use those to help you earn money on your crypto, lend it out, and so on. But this is still a pretty nascent space. So there's a lot more potential here of what we could be doing with blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And I think it's pretty exciting to think about. So I want to talk about a few of those things as well. So there's just been more day-to-day usage all the time for crypto payments. That's been a growing space in the last couple of years, and I think that's starting to take off considerably. And there's also quite a few governments who have either created their own cryptocurrency or announced that they are thinking about doing so, like Venezuela, China, and Russia. But I wouldn't be surprised to see US dollars issued by the United States government on a blockchain. And I think that's actually been discussed before as something that's potentially being considered. And that would give you the properties of the US dollar, but having it be digitally native and global, since it is kind of the world's global reserve currency. There's also a lot of use cases for things that you want kind of like a permanent, immutable record of, like that you earned a degree from your college or that you own your home or things like that. And then I think eventually this could lead to services like Eric mentioned before, such as an Uber or Airbnb, but instead of having that central third party like Uber and Airbnb, instead we could have smart contracts. So I could hire someone for a ride. They know they're going to get money, and I know I'm going to get my ride because our smart contract will actually exchange the service for the funds at the same time. So doing that, you wouldn't have to involve a third party like Uber, and the driver would probably be able to make a little bit more money because they don't have to pay those fees to Uber. So to recap all of these ideas we've talked about, cryptocurrencies are a new form of money with no central authority. There are a lot of different cryptocurrencies, but the two most famous are Bitcoin, which is great for payments, and Ethereum, which supports smart contracts. You can get some cryptocurrency at an exchange, an ATM, or by earning it. And then once you have it, you can use it to invest or try to play the markets. And you don't need a lot of money to get into cryptocurrency. So after this call, I encourage you all to go ahead and get started with $5, $50, or whatever makes sense for you, because it's just a really exciting space. So now we're ready for some questions. I hope you guys all had some fun. So I'm going to kick it over to Eric to start with one.
Great. A lot of great questions coming in over the Q&A thing in here, and the chat thing in here. We're getting some on Twitter and email. Really great to hear. Kick it off with one more technical one. Dennis asks, who are the people who decide these stuff? The number of random characters in the key, amount of time between halvings, etc. Most of the rules of how Bitcoin itself operates were decided either by Satoshi, who was the anonymous creator of Bitcoin back in 2008 and 2009, or they're agreed upon by everybody who uses Bitcoin over time. Really, when somebody comes up with a different strategy, different rules about how private keys need to be stored, different rules about how money is created, they have to basically make a new cryptocurrency. And that's a lot of the reason why you see a lot of those altcoins out there. People who disagree with the sort of agreed upon rules of Bitcoin, and they want to come up with different rules for their own crypto and try to make that work as an alternative. Is that clear?
No, I think that sounds good. Yeah, let's pick another one to talk. There's so many questions. I want to make sure we get to a number of them.
Totally. There's a great one here. Where did that go? If the goal is to make Bitcoin more mainstream and used every day, what do you think it will take to turn hodlers, people who are holding on to Bitcoin, into spenders? What do you think, Claire?
Yeah, good question. I think, the price has been very volatile in the past. And so for those of us who've been in the space for a long time, we've just seen very wild swings. But as crypto gets, used by more and more people, we kind of see this move towards less price volatility. There's been several long periods where the price has been basically the same for quite a long time. And so I think at some point we're going to get to that world where that's just the standard. The price really isn't swinging that much day to day. And I think, unless you're some kind of professional foreign exchange trader, right, it's not going to be a very attractive market for someone who's in it for speculative uses. And I think that's when we start to see more payment use cases. I think that's often true too of other kinds of cryptocurrencies that are not Bitcoin. A lot of those have pretty low volatility. And so I think people are more comfortable using those for purchases at this point. But I think Bitcoin Pizza Day, I don't know if you want to explain that, but that's kind of a perfect example of why people maybe don't feel ready to spend Bitcoin yet.
Yeah, it might end up getting more used kind of behind the scenes than it becomes before it becomes sort of in your face, because there's a lot of banks, financial institutions, governments that might find a lot of use in these decentralized trustless transactions. The question here, it says, due to Bitcoin volatility, there's been various exchanges, not Gemini, thank you for pointing out, that have had to shut down during rapid movements of the price. And if Bitcoin's going to have a bull run coming up, how does Gemini position to handle scale up time as more people are getting into the space? It's a great question. Because Bitcoin is decentralized, anybody can get into this space. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to really have all the skills necessary to build a business around it. When we built Gemini, we really wanted to make sure we were doing it the right way. Started the company in New York City, grabbed financial industry professionals who had built exchanges before in other asset classes and brought them into crypto. Not trying to learn all the lessons of the past over and over again. Sorry, am I breaking up here?
Yeah, we lost you for a second there. Sorry, I don't want to lose your train of thought, but maybe we should move on to a couple other questions, and hopefully your internet will catch up. So absolutely. I see here someone's asking, do you need an exchange to transact Bitcoins with other people? The answer to that is no, you don't. You need to acquire Bitcoins in some way, one of those ways that I talked about before, but you don't need an exchange. You could, for example, have your own wallet that isn't controlled by an exchange and send cryptocurrency to other people. You can also send it to people from an exchange if you'd like. but you don't have to do it that way. So an exchange really just makes it a lot easier to exchange your fiat dollars for crypto. Let's see what else here. So someone talked about smart contracts, and they're kind of wondering what the most beneficial current day use case for smart contracts are. I would say probably the DeFi spaces are the most interesting and exciting right now to me. Really lets people earn interest on their cryptocurrency that they're holding. So if you're like myself and you've been holding cryptocurrency for a long time, you're not really moving it around or doing that much with it. I can lend that out to other people and earn some interest, especially considering that interest rates are effectively negative right now. I'm not really earning much in my savings account. So it's kind of a good time to do that, I think, for a lot of people. And I think it's attracted a lot of new people to the space as well. And then I'll do one more and then pass it back to you, Eric. Another question about crypto taxation and how that works. Obviously, I'm not a tax advisor, so take this with a grain of salt, but it really depends on what you're doing with your crypto. But for the most part, buying cryptocurrency does not incur any tax liabilities. When you sell cryptocurrency, you usually have to pay capital gains tax, at least in the United States. Or if it's a loss, then you can claim that on your taxes as well. And then when you spend cryptocurrency, it's subject to those same rules as well. So effectively, when you're paying for something with crypto, you're essentially selling it. So it's kind of considered that same way. There has been some talk recently about reform in the space because it's just really complicated for most people to deal with. So I'm hoping in the next couple of years, we will see that it becomes a little bit easier to deal with for most people. But today that's kind of how it works. And there's a lot of great pieces of software out there that you can, integrate your portfolio with, and they'll just prepare a form you send to your tax advisor. So it shouldn't be too bad. Eric, maybe you can take one if you're able to be heard.
Sure. Am I coming through all right? Can you hear me?
So far.
All right. Here's a question. I'm still trying to understand the scarcity aspect. Wouldn't the use of Bitcoin be hampered by an organization buying up tons of it? Not necessarily. So even though there's a scarce amount, as you saw on a slide a while ago, it's very, very finely divisible. And actually, when Satoshi or whoever it is created Bitcoin, it kind of did a back of the envelope calculation that if Bitcoin were the world's only currency, if we all stopped using dollars, euros, rupees, whatever, and everybody switched to Bitcoin, still wanted there to be enough Bitcoin out there that you could still conceivably buy a cup of coffee with some. So you can have 0.00000001 Bitcoins. If somebody were buying up a ton of it, it would make the price go up, but it doesn't make Bitcoin work any worse. Another question here, it says, normal financial institutions can't settle in crypto because they're using fiat for clearing and settlement. So do we ever see that changing in the future? Will clearing and settlement change as crypto becomes more regulated? I think we will see that change. And I think there's a couple things that drive that. First of all, as Claire mentioned earlier, there are governments and central banks that are very interested in getting into crypto, either building some sort of offshoot crypto version of their local currency, or even replacing their local currency wholesale with something that's backed by a blockchain, possibly with the same controls, same monetary policy they're using now, but now on a blockchain, so it can be better used on the internet. But also, you can use crypto for clearing and settlement without having to take a lot of price risk. Crypto is so useful for getting money from one party to another in a decentralized and trustless manner that a lot of people are, if you wanted to move $10 million from somewhere in the US, if you're a company moving it from somewhere in the US to somewhere in Europe, both parties would hook up on an exchange that could convert that very quickly and at an accurate price. One of them would move the money into crypto, send it via crypto, and the other one could convert it back. You don't take a lot of price risk. You still get all the benefits of that really fast, that really cheap, that really easy transaction through the internet. So I think there's a lot of ways that people are going to start using crypto more and more that aren't necessarily just buying and holding, aren't necessarily just spending in stores. It could really blow up kind of behind the scenes. Let's see, what else do we have?
Yeah, there was actually a question that might be good for you, Eric, too, about proof of work versus proof of stake. And please explain staking and challenges for those working with proof of stake.
Sure. So Bitcoin, again, the granddaddy of cryptocurrencies, it has a system inside it called proof of work. This is really what makes Bitcoin secure. It's pretty complicated. We don't really have the time to get into all the details of what it is, but essentially, in order to validate all the transactions going around, in order to make sure that nobody can spend money twice, while only one of those transactions would be valid, it involves spending a bunch of computing power, literally having servers or specialized machines that are constantly churning away, running little mathematical formulas. Now, this really works for Bitcoin security, but it's pretty wasteful of electrical energy and all this manufacturing capacity. There's huge server farms, a lot in China, Ireland, and other places that are just churning away on these formulas. So some other cryptocurrencies have used a different system called proof of stake, where holders of the cryptocurrency can basically put up some of their funds as a stake and say, I'll validate transactions. And if I screw up, if I get transactions wrong, if I do anything nefarious, you can take my cryptocurrency away from me. In return for that, they get a little bit of the new cryptocurrency that gets generated. So they're able to earn kind of an interest in it, a return on their crypto by faithfully validating the other transactions that are going on. Proof of stake coins tend to be newer than proof of work coins like Bitcoin. I think there's still a lot of debate over which system is better, which system will end up working out in the future. Notably, Ethereum, again, the second most popular cryptocurrency, is trying to transition from proof of work to proof of stake over the next few years.
I'll take I see that someone asked, how do I access the blockchain? So I'm going to assume that you mean, how do you actually look up transactions on the blockchain and confirm that they happened? So there's tools available, a large number of them, called block explorers, where you can put in, for example, your wallet address, and you can see all of the transactions to and from that wallet. Block explorers mean you're exploring the block that was created, so you can do more than just that, but that's probably the primary use case here is, I sent Eric some money, I say, hey, I sent it, he's like, I don't see it in my wallet. He doesn't need to trust me. He can put in his wallet address and actually confirm that I had sent those funds to him using a block explorer. Sorry, did you have one you were going to do?
Yeah, there's a question here saying, well, if I don't have a bank account, how can I start getting into crypto? This is actually one of the big challenges that we face. While the world is still operating in dollars, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily have access to the financial institutions of the old way of doing money. It's a big challenge that we all struggle with in the crypto space. How do we help people get into crypto when they're blocked off from the existing financial institutions, when they might not have good access to internet, good access to monetary systems? It's something that we're all struggling with. There are ways to get crypto with cash. Some of them are better than others. Gemini doesn't offer that, unfortunately. But we hope that as crypto becomes more and more mainstream, you can sort of start to operate your daily life in crypto. You might be able to earn some and then use that, not have to worry so much about converting back and forth between dollars and crypto all the time.
Cool. I see two that I would like to take. So someone asked, is my Bitcoin safe on an exchange because they're worried about hacks? Or is it safer to keep your money on a hardware wallet? So I would say an exchange is very safe, especially an exchange like Gemini, because we have a lot of protections in place so that your account cannot be hacked. Besides our internal policies and procedures we have so that our software and our computers and our backend cannot be hacked. Typically more of a risk for people is phishing attacks, which is when, you unknowingly give your password to someone you shouldn't have because you maybe thought you were logging into Gemini or something like that. So one of the things we do is we require two-factor authentication for everyone logging into their accounts, meaning you have to have not just your password, but something else like an SMS code or a physical security key, or the Authy app to sign in. So tools like that help protect against phishing attacks, for example. And we have pretty robust security. I don't know if Eric, you want to talk about any of the technical details there, but I think, it's a lot safer to trust someone like Gemini than trust that the hardware won't fail or you won't lose the piece of paper for most people.
Absolutely. The way I like to think about this is at Gemini, we spent millions of dollars. We spent years building the absolute most rock solid, safest crypto security system that we could dream of. There's nothing I would, if I had my druthers to build my own personal crypto security system, I would build Gemini's. And that's why I put my crypto into Gemini. You kind of get the benefit of all the effort and all the resources that we put into making sure that our customers' funds remain safe.
Cool. So taking a couple others here. It's clear how to buy crypto, but how do I exchange it back into cash? Great question. So same way that you bought it, basically, just like you use an exchange to buy it, you can use an exchange to convert your crypto back into cash by selling your crypto. Just like Eric said, that the price of crypto is determined by buyers and sellers. Those buyers are buying from people who are looking to sell their crypto. And so they're offering a price, which you can accept. And then once you've accepted and sold your crypto, you'll have that balance in your wallet, which would now be US dollars, let's say, and then you would just send that to your bank account, for example. So pretty easy. I mean, again, that's not the only way to do it, but that's probably the easiest way to do it for most people. I see also people are asking about new features in our mobile app. And so yes, as a product manager, that's what I do all day basically, is figure out what new features we're going to offer. So Gemini Pay, like I mentioned before, that's a pretty new feature we've rolled out, which would let you pay for things with your crypto rather. And I think we're looking at new things all the time. Kind of same thing with the question of what cryptocurrencies are we looking at adding in the future. I don't know that I can speak to any specifics right now, but pretty much all of us at Gemini are very up to date on the news and what's going on in the cryptocurrency space. And we, keep an eye on ones that we think are exciting and have real benefit for people and how we can get involved. I think one that we've announced but is not yet available, for example, is Filecoin, which I think we all feel is, really exciting and has a lot to offer. I don't know if Eric, you want to talk about the technical aspects there at all, but just as an example, and that's just one, I think, of many that we're considering.
Yeah, if you want to check it out, Filecoins, it hasn't launched yet, but it's really exciting. In addition, it's a blockchain that can be used for file storage, kind of an alternative to Dropbox or backup systems, where your data ends up in sort of living on the blockchain, available in a decentralized manner. You don't have to sort of trust whoever you're looking at for your backups. There's a good question here. If I look at how a bank works, there's a capital reserve requirement set by the government, and they have to hold that against any of the money that they have in deposit or lend out. And the question is, how do exchanges work through that capital holding process? So Gemini is a full reserve exchange. And so what that means is we don't touch any of our customers' money. We hold on to it securely, but all the dollars in your account at Gemini are held on our banking partners. All the crypto that you have in your Gemini account is sitting there in our crypto storage systems. We don't mess with it. We don't lend it out. We don't invest it. So that means that it's as safe as it could be. Not all exchanges work like that, but most do. Additionally, if something goes wrong, in the unlikely event that something would happen to the crypto that's in our storage systems, we're one of the only exchanges in the world that has an insurance policy on our hot wallet, on the main place that we store the crypto that comes in and out of the system.
While you look for a question, Eric, here's an easy one that I could just take. A couple people have asked about Gemini being available in their countries. Typically, the reason we are not always available in every country is that we're very regulated, and we have a regulatory first approach, meaning that we work with regulators before we enter a market. And that's actually, I think, a key differentiator of Gemini, is that you can always trust that whatever we're doing, we're fully licensed and regulated, very intentionally. So to protect consumers and businesses that choose to work with us. So if we're not in your local region yet, we're likely considering it, but most likely are waiting on those regulatory approvals before we can expand. But definitely have expansion in our future, I would say.
Here's a question about that monetary policy of Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin replaces fiat currency, how would the economy be kept afloat in cases like the pandemic, where you can't print more Bitcoin, but the economy is stopped? I'm not a major published economist, so I can't give the most profound answer on this, but there's really a couple schools of thought. One of them is people who think that that whole tool of being able to print more money is itself a bad thing. And if we were to move to a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, where it's all determined in advance by mathematical formulas, then the economy would be able to better weather storms because everybody would have the understanding of exactly what's going to happen to the monetary supply. Another school of thought here is that there's room in the world for more than one cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is great, but there could also be cryptocurrencies run by central banks, which have a flexible monetary policy based on what the whims of that central bank want to do. There could be cryptocurrencies that are constantly inflationary instead of deflationary. All those possibilities could exist, and funds could travel between cryptocurrencies as necessary based on what the economy was going to do. So there's all sorts of cryptocurrencies out there. Maybe there's a world where Bitcoin occupies that kind of safe haven, sort of gold sort of function, whereas another cryptocurrency might be more of what you use day to day, and they might have a totally different economic policies around it.
Sorry, I just saw a question I wanted to answer and now I can't find it. Do you think we will ever find out who Satoshi is? I think at this point, I would say probably not, but you never know, of course. I think people would love to know, but I actually think it could potentially be harmful for the space, because I think right now, cryptocurrency gets to be about the idea rather than the people who created it. And so I think that's really powerful. And it's something that's really helped it persevere throughout all these years. So I kind of hope that we don't. I don't know if Eric, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think we know whoever invented Bitcoin is a very smart person. Whether it was a man, a woman, a group of people, a government entity, whoever is Satoshi certainly knew what they were doing. And they probably know enough to stay hidden forever. Probably made enough money off of it that they can live comfortably and pretty anonymously, and probably want to stay that way.
I think sorry, I was going to suggest two questions that I think you could kind of answer together, which someone's asking about how long it takes a transaction to be registered, as well as they're curious about how mining works. So maybe you could give a high-level explanation of those.
Sure. So when you want to transact on the Bitcoin network, say I wanted to send 0.0001 Bitcoin to Claire, I either would send it through Gemini, or I use my cell phone wallet or some other way. That transaction goes out onto the Bitcoin network and it gets copied to everybody who's running Bitcoin software. And everybody who's running that Bitcoin software independently verifies that transaction is valid. But that transaction isn't necessarily confirmed yet, because it could be possible that at the exact same time I try to send all my Bitcoin to Claire, I might also try to send all my Bitcoin to somebody else. And only one of those two transactions could be valid. So the network has to figure out, even though I had the private key and I proved that I could spend that Bitcoin twice, I have to decide which of those two transactions is going to be the one that actually hits the blockchain and is the one that's going to work, versus the one that's going to get rejected because I don't have enough Bitcoin to send both. And that's really what the process of mining is all about. Now, this next part can differ between different cryptocurrencies. It's where a lot of the innovation happens with other different cryptos. But for Bitcoin, about every 10 minutes, those servers I mentioned earlier that are running this mathematical formula, what they're doing is called mining. Those entities, they choose a valid ordering of transactions, which ones to accept and which ones are invalid and reject. So which one of my two conflicting transactions can be in the blockchain. They pick that order, and then they run a mathematical formula over that list of transactions in order to find what's called a block. A block of transactions, say 7,000 or 10,000 transactions, to add to the chain of blocks. That happens about every 10 minutes. So about every 10 minutes, a new batch of transactions get confirmed in Bitcoin. And every 10 minutes that go by means that your transaction is even more confirmed. It's even less mathematically likely that somebody would be able to reverse or spend your Bitcoin somewhere else. There are other cryptocurrencies that use different systems, like the proof of stake system I mentioned earlier. There are other cryptocurrencies that use different time values, where you might get a block every 2 minutes instead of every 10 minutes, or even every couple seconds instead of every 2 minutes. So they all work differently. It's a really interesting area, but the idea is your transaction is getting confirmed by these miners who are determining not just that your transaction is valid, but the proper ordering of every transaction that's ever happened in the network.
So,
anything add on that, Claire?
No, I don't. I think we actually have to wrap up here, but I was just going to answer quickly one more. Someone had asked, the value of my cryptocurrency changes over time. So today I buy $100 worth, tomorrow it's worth $50. I think the answer to that is that you always have the same amount of cryptocurrency. So in a world where price volatility, is kind of locked down and not happening as often, you would still have that same amount of crypto, And so if you bought half a Bitcoin today, you have half a Bitcoin tomorrow, regardless of what the US dollar value is. And so, as long as you're holding it, you still have that amount of Bitcoin. And I think at some point in the future, you'll be able to buy things for half a Bitcoin, not for $100 or $50 or whatever it is.
All right, I think that's all the time we've got. Thank you everybody so much for attending this Intro to Crypto webinar. We hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you all found it valuable. If you're interested in continuing to learn about crypto, go ahead and follow us on social media. You see our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything up there. Check out our website. We've got a whole educational resources section called Gemini Learn. And even if you're interested in creating some educational content with us, please feel free to email us at events@gemini.com or go ahead and DM us on Twitter. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.